There's something funny about humans and crowns. We can't help ourselves. Give us a hierarchy and we'll immediately ask, okay, but who's the king? We do it with countries, with fast food chains, with pop stars, and yes, even with dinosaurs. And for more than a century, the crown sat comfortably on one very big, very bite-happy head, Tyrannosaurus rex. The undisputed ruler of prehistory, the celebrity carnivore, the monster that launched 1,000 museum gift shops. Every time a movie needed a roar, every time a toy company needed a logo, every time a child wanted to feel invincible, there he was. The king, the headline act of the Cretaceous. And honestly, can you blame us? I mean, T-Rex had everything.
Size? Check.
We're talking about an animal that could reach over 12 meters or 40 feet in length and weigh upwards of 9 tons. That's basically 2 elephants duct taped together and given a really, really bad attitude. Teeth? Oh boy, did it have teeth. We're talking about serrated bone crushers up to 30 centimeters or 12 inches long that could punch through the armor of pretty much anything stupid enough to get close. And that bite force? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,800 pounds or 57,000 newtons. For context, that's enough force to theoretically bite through a car. Not that they had cars back then, but you get the idea. So yeah, T-Rex earned its reputation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. T-Rex's reign was built on confidence, not consensus. Scientists agreed he was terrifying. They just didn't all agree on why or if he was even as unique as everyone claimed. Still, when you're the poster boy of extinction, no one rushes to question your legacy. At least not until the fossils started whispering otherwise. Because somewhere in Montana, lying silent under 67 million years of dirt was a secret the king didn't want to share. A story frozen in stone. 2 dinosaurs preserved together forever, teeth against bone, predator near prey. They'd been found in close proximity when death hit pause. And in that moment, something miraculous happened. Their skeletons were buried together in a single snapshot that looks an awful lot like violence. The world would call them the Dueling Dinosaurs. But paleontologists? They'd call them a headache that lasted 40 years. So before we go any further down this prehistoric rabbit hole where dinosaurs maybe fight to the death and scientists definitely fight on Twitter, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Because the last time someone ignored a warning this old, an asteroid showed up. And while you're at it, drop a like. Every like you give scientifically proves you have excellent taste. I don't make the rules. That's just how paleontology works. Alright, back to Montana. When the fossil first came to light in 2006, it felt like a once-in-a-career discovery. We're talking about a rancher in Montana who stumbled upon not one but 2 complete skeletons, one a ceratopsian, the other a tyrannosaur, preserved in extremely close proximity in what looked like the dinosaur equivalent of an action movie freeze frame. And I mean complete. Like over 90% complete for both specimens, which in the fossil world is basically winning the lottery while simultaneously getting struck by lightning in a good way. The ceratopsian was a chasmosaurin, a close relative of Triceratops, a herbivore built like a living tank, with a face full of horns that could turn any predator into a very unfortunate shish kebab. This one weighed in at around 7 tons and measured about 7 to 8 meters or 23 to 26 feet long. Not something you'd want to mess with. But apparently, the Tyrannosaur got close to it, and things did not go well for either party. The Tyrannosaur, though, that's where things got interesting. Because when scientists examined it, they expected to find a juvenile T-Rex, you know, a teenage king still growing into his massive skull and learning how to properly terrorize a continent. Except instead of clear-cut answers, the discovery triggered chaos. Because this thing didn't look quite like what they expected from a teenager. Its bones had features that raised eyebrows. Its limbs were proportioned differently. Its skull didn't perfectly match the known juvenile T-Rex growth trajectory. And that's when the murmurs began. What if this wasn't just a young Rex? What if it was something else entirely? Now, the idea wasn't exactly new. Way back in 1946, a paleontologist named Charles W. Gilmore had described a mysterious smaller tyrannosaur skull and named it Nanotyrannus lancensis, which translates to dwarf tyrant. But over the decades, most scientists quietly demoted it, declaring it just a juvenile T-Rex going through its awkward phase, a kind of prehistoric puberty problem, if you will. The scientific consensus became, hey, it's probably just a young Rex. Case closed. But the dueling dinosaur specimen made people reconsider. The more some researchers studied it, the more they argued it showed signs that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't in the process of growing into a full-sized adult T-Rex. Some histology studies suggested mature growth patterns. Some bone features looked finished rather than developing. It raised the possibility that this wasn't a baby king, but a different predator entirely, and suddenly the throne didn't look quite so exclusive anymore. For years, mentioning Nanotyrannus in professional circles was like saying you'd seen Bigfoot at the Smithsonian. You'd get polite smiles and the slow backing away of colleagues. Scientists don't like to admit uncertainty, especially when it involves reopening decades of textbooks, rewriting museum labels, and admitting that maybe, just maybe, the story was more complicated than everyone thought. But the Dueling Dinosaurs fossil made the question impossible to ignore. Here was an animal that some researchers argued showed every mark of adulthood. And not just that, if it was a separate species, it would have been agile, fast, designed for precision over brute strength. If T-Rex was the wrecking ball, this one would have been the scalpel. And that difference wasn't just aesthetic. It would change the entire story of Cretaceous North America, because if Nanotyrannus turns out to be real, it would mean there wasn't one apex predator, but two, each built for a different kind of hunt. One massive and methodical, one lean and efficient. It would be as if evolution had said, let's see what happens when we let competition sharpen the knives. Of course, scientists have argued about this for years. That's what science does best. Argue politely, publish passive-aggressive papers, and attend conferences where everyone pretends to agree over coffee. And to be clear, the debate is very much ongoing. Most paleontologists still believe all supposed Nanotyrannus specimens are just young T-Rex individuals. But a vocal minority insists the evidence points to something else. And that tension? That's what makes the dueling dinosaurs so fascinating. The problem with fossils is that they're terrible liars. You can bury them under rock, under time, under millions of years of human misunderstanding, but if you look close enough, they'll eventually tell you what happened. The Dueling Dinosaurs fossil had plenty to say. When it was first uncovered in the badlands of Montana, the scene looked almost staged. Two skeletons, one a horned herbivore weighing nearly 7 tons, the other a sleek carnivore stretching about 8 meters or 26 feet from nose to tail, preserved together as if time itself had decided to freeze them in place. The injuries on both animals, the positioning, everything suggested a violent encounter. Maybe they fought. Maybe one attacked the other. Maybe they just happened to die near each other in the same catastrophic event. We don't know for certain. But whatever happened, both were buried rapidly, likely by a sudden landslide or flash flood that froze their remains for eternity. That was the setup. The real mystery came later. Every living thing records its age inside its bones, like tree rings in miniature. When researchers studied the Tyrannosaur's cross-sections under microscopes, they found something unexpected. Instead of the wide, loosely spaced growth bands typical of a rapidly growing juvenile, they found narrower, more compact rings. To some researchers, this suggested the animal had reached adulthood and stopped growing. To others, it was still consistent with a subadult individual. The debate continues. Then came the skull. A full-grown T-Rex skull was a blunt instrument, nearly 1.5 meters or 5 feet of bone, built for crushing through armor and arrogance alike. The bite marks left by T-Rex on other dinosaur bones show punctures and crushing damage that could only come from a jaw designed to obliterate. This skull, though, was leaner, closer to 1 meter or about 3.3 feet long, with narrow jaws and blade-edged teeth. Not the serrated wrecking bars of a bone crusher, but what looked like the surgical tools of something that preferred precision over power. The teeth themselves were different. Where T-Rex teeth were thick, conical, and designed to grip and crush, these teeth were thinner, more blade-like, with finer serrations. If this was a separate species, these would have been teeth for slicing through flesh and causing rapid blood loss, not for biting through bone. Different tools, different jobs. But if it was a juvenile T-Rex, these features might simply represent an earlier stage of development. The arms were interesting too. Where T-Rex's forelimbs were famously comical, barely brushing 1 meter or 3 feet, and essentially useless for anything except maybe scratching an itch, this animal's arms reached a bit farther, with proportions that suggested more functionality. Not quite the grasping weapons some researchers imagined, but definitely not as reduced as an adult T-Rex. Whether that means separate species or just juvenile anatomy, well, that's the million-dollar question. Even the legs raised eyebrows. The bones were proportionally longer and more slender than what you'd expect in a bulky adult T-Rex, built more for speed than for supporting massive weight. If this was a separate species, it would have been a sprinter, a refined predator that relied on pursuit rather than ambush. Based on biomechanics, some researchers have speculated that smaller tyrannosaurids, whether juveniles or a separate species, could have run faster than adult T-Rex, potentially reaching speeds in the mid-30s kilometers per hour or low 20s miles per hour range. But that's speculative. We're still figuring out how fast any dinosaur could actually move. Each measurement, each scan, each analysis whispered a different story, depending on who you asked. To some, this wasn't a prince waiting to grow into a crown. It was another monarch entirely. To others, it was exactly what you'd expect from a teenage T-Rex. And that disagreement, that's what makes paleontology so wonderfully frustrating. Of course, the reaction was about as graceful as a meteor strike. Science runs on data but thrives on ego, and suggesting that the beloved king might have had competition, or that we might have been misidentifying juveniles for decades, was like announcing that the Mona Lisa wasn't smiling, just tolerating you. For decades, the debate turned into an academic Cold War. One camp saw a juvenile T-Rex, the other saw a fully grown Nanotyrannus. Each side published papers with all the warmth of divorce proceedings. But the fossils didn't care. They'd been patient for 67 million years. They could wait a few more peer reviews. In 2020, a comprehensive study analyzing growth patterns, bone histology, and anatomical differences provided strong evidence favoring the Nanotyrannus hypothesis. The study suggested adult bone maturity and identified multiple unique skeletal features that didn't match the expected juvenile T-Rex growth trajectory. But here's the thing, that study didn't settle the debate. Other paleontologists pushed back, arguing that the evidence was still consistent with juvenile variation. And so the argument continues. The fossils had spoken, but apparently we still don't all agree on what they said. The fall of a king rarely begins with a roar. It starts with a whisper, a single fossil that refuses to fit neatly into the story. For 100 years, Tyrannosaurus rex stood uncontested. The apex, the poster child, the one creature that could silence a room just by being mentioned. But that was before scientists started pulling 8-meter mysteries out of the dirt and asking uncomfortable questions. Because if, and this is still a big if Nanotyrannus turns out to be a separate species, it would mean that in the fading light of the late Cretaceous, the throne was shared. Two predators, not one, ruled the dying forests of North America, the bulky, mountain-jawed T-Rex and the smaller, faster Nanotyrannus. They would have occupied overlapping territories. Their diets would have clashed. And while T-Rex moved like a wrecking ball wrapped in muscle, Nanotyrannus would have been all economy. Less mass, more motion, every limb designed to end a chase quickly. Picture a landscape full of noise and nerves. Herds of ceratopsians thundering through river valleys, hadrosaurs migrating like slow-moving buffets, and somewhere between them, two kinds of hunters measuring their opportunities in silence. The big one relying on momentum, a single bite, and it was over. The smaller one, if it existed, relying on precision, speed, and timing. If you were a prey animal in those last million years before the asteroid, and if there really were two types of large tyrannosaurs hunting you, there would have been no good option. You could try to outrun the smaller one for maybe 30 seconds, or outmuscle the bigger one for none. For paleontologists, even the possibility of this scenario rewires everything. The late Cretaceous might not have been a monarchy. It might have been an arms race. Predators evolving side by side, forcing each other into specialization, locked in the biological equivalent of competition that sharpened both. If Nanotyrannus was real at roughly 8 meters or 26 feet long and weighing somewhere under 2 tons, it would have been half the mass of a full-grown T-Rex, but potentially faster and more agile. Its narrower skull and different proportions would have made it a different kind of hunter. A weapon built for efficiency instead of intimidation. Where T-Rex likely ambushed prey from hiding spots, using its mass and bite force to deliver a killing blow, a separate, smaller Tyrannosaur species might have been a pursuit predator, chasing down prey that T-Rex couldn't catch. And this division of labor would have reduced direct competition between the two. T-Rex going after the big, slow herbivores, the massive ceratopsians, the chunky hadrosaurs, anything with enough meat to justify the energy expenditure. Nanotyrannus, if it existed, targeting younger animals, smaller species, anything that required speed and agility to catch. Different niches, different strategies, both potentially deadly. So when that fossilized scene was preserved in the Montana mud, with injuries on both animals and their bodies buried together, it wasn't necessarily a snapshot of battle, but it was consistent with a violent encounter. And whether or not the Tyrannosaur was a separate species, the scene itself is remarkable. A moment frozen in time, a glimpse into a world where predators and prey met in ways that didn't always end well for either party. We call it the Dueling Dinosaurs. But maybe it represents something even bigger. Maybe it's a reminder that evolution doesn't hand out simple answers, that the line between species can be blurry, that even after millions of years and decades of study, we're still learning, still debating, still discovering that the past is more complicated than we thought. And here's the thing, this isn't just about two animals and whether they were fighting over a meal. This is about what happens when evolution experiments with different approaches to the same problem. Do you build a tank or a sports car? Do you crush your enemies or outmaneuver them? If Nanotyrannus was real, then T-Rex said crush and Nanotyrannus said outrun. And for millions of years, both strategies might have worked. Of course, the universe doesn't care about royal disputes. A few million years later, the sky burned, the ground turned toxic, and both potential strategies turned to ash. Somewhere around 66 million years ago, a 10-kilometer-wide asteroid slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. The impact triggered tsunamis, wildfires, and a global winter that lasted for years. And when the dust settled, literally, whether there was one Tyrannosaur species or two, they were all gone, along with about 75% of all species on Earth. And somewhere under layers of stone and silence, their skeletons still lie there, the last evidence that, even in extinction, mysteries die hard. If there's one thing fossils teach us, it's humility. No matter how certain we are, how proud of our discoveries or our classifications, time eventually shows up with a shovel and says, actually, it's complicated. The story of Nanotyrannus is more than a taxonomic argument. It's a reminder that truth doesn't care about prestige. The bones don't lie, they just wait. And when they finally speak, they tell stories that challenge everything we thought we knew. Whether or not there was a second great predator sharing the late Cretaceous with T-Rex, the debate itself is valuable. The fossilized scene isn't just about death. It's about motion, ambition, evolution caught mid-stride. Two creatures preserved in their final moments, unaware that they'd just become humanity's favorite scientific argument. Millions of years later, we still debate what they were, how they lived, who deserved the crown. Maybe that's the real lesson. The dinosaurs moved on, but we're still asking their questions. And somewhere under a museum's quiet lights, behind the glass and labels, the dueling dinosaurs rest, unchanged, undefeated, and probably a little amused, because long after we're gone, they'll still be there, still preserved together, still whispering that truth takes time. Thanks for hanging out with me, and until next time on Dead Curious.